So now we're going to move on to our first panel of the day. And as I said, we have 3 excellent panels. Our first panel is going to be focused on reacting to that economic outlook and telling us what they see from their own industry perspective. We will invite up Linda Bowden, who is going to be our facilitator today, as well as the panel members. And while they're making their way up, let me just tell you that Linda herself is the regional president of PNC Bank. And I know Linda for a long time, and I have to tell you, her numerous awards as a business leader and investor in community in the state of New Jersey just distinguishes her from her colleagues, head and shoulders above. So Linda, I'm so excited that you're able to be here to facilitate our panel today, and I know you'll introduce those serving on the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Okay, panelists, why don't you come up and join us? I see Rick over there. Good morning, everyone. As our panelists are coming up, I just have to make a comment. Michelle, thank you for that very thorough overview in terms of the study from the NJBIA. And from my perspective, we have a terrific leader at the helm of this organization. Michelle, yeah. This must be our mutual admiration society, because every time I observe Michelle, she's positive, she's impassioned around our state, but she's also very clear-eyed about the challenges and doesn't sugarcoat it, and that's a very winning combination. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I think that this may be one of the most interesting times ever to assemble an economic panel, probably in recent history. If you think about it, certainly there is a great deal of transition from an economic standpoint, but also from a political standpoint, a social standpoint, and an historical standpoint. Michelle referenced her biggest worry as uncertainty, and I certainly think there's a lot of that in this room today, but also some positives. And we're really here, I think every single person is really here because what does this all mean for our state? You're here as business leaders. What does this mean for your business? But I would also say you're here as New Jersey residents. What does this mean for you specifically? We love our state. We want to see it prosper. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So to ensure that we have a really interesting and maybe a little controversial conversation here, we have assembled a senior accountant, a senior attorney, and representatives from both the health and utility business to talk about exactly that. So let me get started by introducing our terrific panelists. Walter Brash, who's president of the New Jersey Society of CPAs. He's a partner and chief business development officer at PKF O'Connor Davies. And welcome, Walter. Hold your applause till the end if you would. Bill Castor, who is a senior vice president, corporate and regulatory affairs at Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield. Philip McGovern, managing partner, Connell Foley, our law firm here in New Jersey, and Rick Thigpen, who's vice president, state governmental affairs, Public Service Electric and Gas Services Corporation. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. Well, there's certainly a lot to discuss, and we are going to try and focus on the economic piece and certainly focus specifically on New Jersey. And I'd like to start by really creating a segue from Michelle's presentation. And I'm going to start, Bill, with you, if I may. As we look to the state's economy in 2017, based on the results of that Business Outlook survey, what are your views of the economy from a New Jersey perspective?
Well, I was happy to hear Michelle reference the high cost of health care as an ongoing and predominant factor in your survey. Would you have a supermajority, like 3/4 or 2/3 or 3/4 of health businesses say this is a big deal? It is a big deal. I mean, from our perspective, the easy thing for a company with our market share to do is, keep issuing double-digit premiums, fly the blimp around, call it a day. But we have 3.8 million consumers who are saying, no, the status quo is not sustainable. We have the second highest healthcare costs in the United States of America, meaning we have the second highest healthcare costs in the galaxy, right? So what can we do about it? So what I'm proud of my company is the leadership decided to unveil a product, try to lower costs. We had a lot of political blowback over it as a product called Omnia, but it was the right thing to do. It's what our businesses demanded. It's what our consumers demanded. And frankly, unless you are trying to innovate in our space and move away from a fee-for-service model. That's really a heads and beds model in healthcare. It's not sustainable. It's not the status quo. So we have a bet the company proposition in value-based care. It's working. The product was wildly successful. We have over 250,000 New Jerseyans who enrolled in it. And what I'm grateful for is BIA had the guts to stand up in the State House and say, time out, this is not like hospitals versus insurance companies, some big food fight. This is about lower healthcare costs. And I'm very grateful that BIA is an incredible partner and has the fortitude to say, let's cut through all the political nonsense and focus on what's really killing our members.
Great.
So it was a great success story for us.
Thank you, Bill. That's terrific. Walter, I'm going to turn to you. Michelle also referenced a big success that we had this year, the reauthorization of the Transportation Trust Fund, and then also, of course, the corresponding increase in gas tax. What impact do you see for our state?
Well, Linda, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and I am speaking on behalf of my profession, the State Society of CPAs, and we were partners, our society, with BIA, with the Chamber, and really promoting the comprehensive tax reform that was mentioned by Michelle. And we're active in Opportunity New Jersey, and I think, you know, we do agree that there needs to be a lot more of what just happened in 2016. Our members are still very concerned about some of the headwinds, and they advise clients every day. I do think the impact of, well, just take the state tax reform, and I think clearly our members feel that that's a positive, and we're now at least telling clients you don't necessarily have to move out and migrate to Pennsylvania or wherever you're going to go, North Carolina or Florida, but clearly this is a change that's going to, I think, help stem them out migration. Our members still have concerns about affordability and property taxes, no doubt about it. We all live and work here, and those things have to be addressed at some near-term future. But I think I can tell you from experience with the gas tax, 2 nights ago, the county decided to pave a road through my sleepy town in Monmouth County and kept half the town up at night because it was a delayed project by not funding local projects. So that wasn't good, but I called the mayor and let him know my feelings about that yesterday morning at 6 a.m. But I think the gas tax, from our members' perspective, was, you know, I think we annoyed some members with supporting it, but I think clearly the investments had to get made. If you think about the last gas tax increase was 1988, and you tell me if cost of construction has not changed since 1988, clearly it has, and it was time to really do something about that. So we were really all in favor of the comprehensive tax reform that was passed, and we'll continue to press forward on those issues with our other business constituents.
Thank you, Walter. And actually, several of us were at a meeting yesterday where anecdotally we talked about the fact that 3 significant Jersey residents who had moved out of the state are now talking about moving back in. So let's hope that's a trend. I think that would make an enormous difference for us. Phil, from a legal perspective, what about the effects of the elimination of the estate tax and the increase in the pension tax exclusion? What are your thoughts in terms of how it will affect that migration?
Clients clearly will be interested in the availability of the deductions and the eliminations of the monies from a standpoint, as has been mentioned before, of continuing to remain in the state. For our industry, any change in the law is always a good industry because it always creates new business and new work for the legal industry. How long that will last, once you eliminate a tax, that takes away a lot of planning opportunities for the lawyers. But it's exciting, and one of the things as I sit and think about it is, we're going to have to see, how dramatic of an impact, will these changes have on the residents? Will they be the tipping point, to keep folks here, or are there going to be other issues that are going to be, as important? Someone mentioned the property tax issue before. I live in Essex County, in Nutley. My property taxes are significant, given some of the costs and expenditures in northern New Jersey that local government has to make. So, there's a whole host of factors, I think, that go into play with folks in terms of their determination of retirement and family planning. But from a transition of business practice standpoint, I think it's going to be a big benefit to business owners to eliminate the doubt and concern as to what to do with the family business if it's not transitioned to the younger generation.
I would agree, and it's interesting that every industry is impacted differently. I feel your pain in terms of the estate planning piece, because certainly from a banking standpoint, we have a strong trust industry, so we're very much involved in that as well. Always consequences, always consequences. Let's go back to Bill, if we may, as our healthcare representative. And Bill, you touched on this earlier in terms of the cost of healthcare. That was the biggest concern that industry leaders, business leaders had here in the state. And I think it's worth going back to and delving into a little bit more deeply, because for those of you who are, especially small business owners, this is an onerous burden that we have to bear. So how can we address that going forward?
Well, there's strength in numbers. So I heard Michelle talking about building strong coalitions, and I think that's really, really important. How many times is business and labor on the same page in New Jersey? Not terribly frequently, although the TTF is a great example. So what we've worked with BIA and others is to form an organization called Better Choices, Better Care, to have a permanent vehicle. When we were attacked for unveiling a low-cost health care plan last year, we had to scramble to get a coalition of like-minded people together. And so the idea is, let's have some permanency in place, because it was tiered networks yesterday. We have a big problem with surprise medical bills and out-of-network costs today. Maybe it's prescription drug prices tomorrow. We need to be on the same page to make sure stakeholders understand this is not about the status quo. The status quo is not acceptable. So I think strength in numbers is really one of the most important long-term things we can do.
Yeah, and I think we have that. We have that.
Just from a practical standpoint, in our firm, a number of years we had faced significant increases in healthcare costs, ranging anywhere from probably a low of 3% to a high one year of 28%, and it was staggering costs. Our spend is probably anywhere from 12 to 18% of our expense each year on healthcare. We instituted a year and a half ago a wellness program, and I don't know if it was the wellness program or just dumb luck, but we received an 8% reduction on our premium this year. And that has gone a long way in terms of education of our workforce, keeping people in network programs, and taking responsibility for their own health care, and doing a lot of things on a proactive basis. So it's really been a big success with us. As I said, knock on wood. It may be, maybe dumb Jersey City Irish luck, but we're keeping it.
If you drill down, last year, for the first time ever in the history of our company, we've been in New Jersey for 85 years. We paid more in prescription drug prices than we did for inpatient hospital stay. And by the way, inpatient hospital costs are not inexpensive. And we have to drive down those costs as well. We have a crisis in New Jersey in which a microscopic number of providers, we have 9 out of 10 hospitals in our network, and we have 8 out of 10 physicians in our network, and we have half the market. Those microscopic few providers are driving up costs $1 billion a year in New Jersey through an out-of-network surprise medical bill loophole. If you end up in a hospital in an emergency room that's not in network, they impose charges. We pay it. We paying it means you pay, because we have 2% margin. We don't have shareholders. We have a 2% margin. Okay, so that's the type of thing. And again, getting coalitions together to educate lawmakers about these types of issues is retail.
Yeah. Let's move off healthcare for a second, although it continues to be tremendously important in this state. And Rick, I want to get your voice in the room. Clearly, the changes that we've been talking about impact all industries in the state. And I can share, certainly from a banking perspective, we are a very heavily regulated industry, not unlike yours, Rick. And I think from that standpoint, those of you who are bankers in the room, or those of you who own banking stock in the room, have every single day looked at that stock market in slack-jawed wonder at what has happened to these stock prices in the past month. So, Rick, I'd love to hear your thoughts with Inauguration Day fast approaching and really at the early stage. How do you see the election impacting your industry, but also if you can include your perspective as a state leader?
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, everybody, for being here today. The first thing is I'd like to agree with Bill. We are also very happy to see healthcare costs be the business community's top concern. That was a joke, everybody. So, having said that, as we are apparently going to plan to make America great again, It's going to have some potentially meaningful impacts for public service, certainly. You know, we have about 13,000 employees, and we are in the business of power generation among other businesses, including delivering power to your homes and keeping houses lit and warm. And the issue of climate change is always right there one step behind. And it's not entirely clear what our new administration is going to do. They do seem to have a affinity for fossil fuels. We recently announced the closing of 2 coal plants in New Jersey, right? One in Hamilton Township, one in Jersey City, which was about 8 miles from Times Square. And there's going to be some business pressure maybe to stick with fossil fuels. So at Public Service, we have been paying close attention to the issue of carbon reduction. We have a very powerful nuclear fleet. How that fits into the future with the new administration and our concerns about global warming remain to be seen. Michelle mentioned we're looking at changes in the State House. It could be what we've seen in the past, which is an administration and a federal government interested in moving very slowly on the issue of climate change and carbon reduction, and a state government interested in moving much quicker on that issue, and that challenge is in front of us. So how do we make sure we keep rates down and don't join Bill Castner, so to speak, in facing that heat is going to be the constant challenge. I think I've also learned that there's not a business in our state who doesn't think that reliable sources of electricity aren't an important part of their business model and a reason for people to come to our state. And then we do have 13,000 employees, and I've heard Michelle also talk about the quality workforce. And it is very hard to have a quality workforce if your children are not having proper health care, or if you don't have proper health care, or if we don't pay attention to wellness, not just access to a doctor when you do get sick. So these issues do affect us all, and hopefully, aside from the specific challenges of the business, for public service, being a good corporate citizen is very important. And our business model, in some regards, is very simple. If the state of New Jersey's economy grows and does well, public service will do the same. And so we do have that obligation to see if we can join with Michelle and others to have business policies that do allow our state to grow, and that we do keep the cost down, and we also deliver a very, very effective product. So I'll just finish by saying climate change is the big issue. We've also heard the administration talk about infrastructure. And if infrastructure includes energy delivery infrastructure, then we will have lots of work to do with the new administration, really making our state great again, preparing for the future in hopefully a thoughtful way where everybody can participate, and making sure that houses are warm and lit at a price that people can afford, and that businesses want to come here because their electric prices are manageable, and that they can be very sure that we are first in the nation on the issue of reliability at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And Rick, I have to say, because you have such a unique perspective, you referenced the 2 coal plants here in New Jersey being closed. Certainly, this new administration is promising to reestablish coal jobs, but yet the other school of thought is both automation and cheap natural gas is really going to conspire against that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, there's no question. In fact, energy policy is a very, very big deal for us, right? We are going to close coal plants because of, ours were built when Eisenhower and Kennedy were president, right? These are older plants also, so their efficiency is not matching more modern technologies, but there's not a huge appetite for additional air pollution in the state of New Jersey, and the expense of having what we call back-end technology has made coal something that's probably not economically feasible. Then there's nuclear power, which is very much on our mind because natural gas prices are so low, it's challenging the economics of running nuclear. But there's also a very, very small appetite for more pipelines in our state that we've noticed. Some people think it's very important to have them, but they are very, very controversial. And I would say that it would be very risky to plan on New Jersey building more natural gas pipelines to bring in more natural gas into our state. Whether or not fracking is a good thing is something that's open for debate, but it has fundamentally changed our industry. And then there's that other very popular elephant in this room, and that is renewables. We do lots of solar in New Jersey, even though we don't have the most sun. I was just in California, right? You kind of quickly notice the difference in sunshine between New Jersey and California, right?
Recently.
Yeah, I will still take it. So There's no question that we do have lots of solar in New Jersey. There's talk about offshore wind. And then there's that old issue that we talk about that's not always popular called energy efficiency. You know, as an American, you probably use twice as much energy per person as you do if you're a citizen of England, France, or Japan. And that's not only about standard of living, therefore, that's also about our behavior. And, you know, I like to make jokes, even though I'm not necessarily funny, but central air conditioning is a great thing for public service, right? It's not the best thing in terms of our state's environmental footprint. So is our new administration going to continue to help us develop solar and wind? Mm-hmm. Is it going to support nuclear, or is it going to say that natural gas is so cheap that that is where all of us need to spend our time and energy and deal with the environmental consequences of it? You know, because our state is so densely populated and we are downwind from so much coal, we have to pay attention to having our air be clean in our state, and that sometimes is a cost burden on us. And how do we manage that cost in exchange for making sure our children grow up healthy and that we live in a state that you want to go to the shore and vacation? And that challenge is in front of us. It's going to take some meaningful dialogue. And one thing our national election did teach us, we have to be careful to have dialogue about our differences and not turn these differences into something that doesn't allow us to work together and where we treat each other in a hostile fashion. So we have some challenges together, and I'm looking forward to having that dialogue and to talking to those who see the world very differently than I do and we do, so that we can find solutions that the business community can support and that we are going to be moving forward, hopefully, affordably with a clean environment that we want to raise our children in, and that the reason people leave our state is not because the air is too dirty or the environment's too polluted. Not that cost is not an insignificant issue, but we certainly don't want to add that to the list.
Agree. Thank you, Rick. Well, it's interesting because we talk about competing forces and differences of opinion. Michelle referenced we have a gubernatorial election coming up in 2017, in case you haven't heard. And Walter, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially in terms of some of the statewide leadership positions that you hold. What potential changes do you see? What are the impacts of a Democratic-led state or a Republican-led state?
Well, Lynn, I think the political panel is later.
Oh, no.
Good political answer.
You can't wiggle out of this. From an economic standpoint.
We lawyers are supposed to answer that way.
Exactly. Well, Linda, I had the privilege of being here last year, and I think as a CPA and I'm born and raised here in New Jersey, I have deep concerns, as does many of my colleagues, about really where the state is financially. And I referenced last year where our debt is as a state, okay? And I do have those numbers for you today, which is as of June 30 of 2050. Now, it takes the state almost 10 months to issue this report, and I referenced it last year. So I have to say that since 2009 through 2015, the non-bonded debt of this state has gone up 600%. 600%. It was $15.7 billion as of June 30, 2009. It is now $110.5 billion and growing, okay? At some point, okay, this is not sustainable as a state. The bonded debt is about the same, believe it or not. So our bonding capacity has been cut in half from 13 to 15, okay? At what point is it the tipping point? That's my concern. And it's you all, you know, manage personally your finances, you do financial planning, and CPAs advise clients all the time about their business and their future, but we look to the past. We look at what's our earnings, you know, what's our tax picture. This state is in deep trouble, and somebody has to wake up, and I really hope the next election bears this out. I said to Matt Malott about Opportunity in New Jersey, we need a white paper study, truly, the accounting profession will be there, about where this state is financially. And at some point, they have to recognize where we're at, and it's not going in a great direction. So I'm a positive person like Michelle, okay, but this is a headwind, and at some point, it's gonna rear its head, and it's coming, okay? So that's my concern. And how much can you tax in this state? I don't know what's left to tax, quite frankly. Okay, they've talked about sales tax on professional services. I think Phil and I would not be in favor of that. Okay? They've talked about millionaires tax. Okay, that's a regressive tax, just like the estate tax. I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer has to be reform at the expenditure level. okay? Nobody talks about cutting expenditures and reducing government. It's all about increasing government. And I think at this point in our state's history, we're at a tipping point. So that's my concern, Linda.
And by the way, I noticed how deftly you avoided the Republican-Democratic aspect of the question. Anyone brave enough to tackle that part of it? Rick?
Sure.
Thank you, Walter. You know I'm teasing
No,
you.
dumb enough was the statement. So what I'll say is the national election did teach us something about our state. 58% of white voters supported Donald Trump, but only 24% of non-white voters. We have a gubernatorial election coming, and the challenge is not to conduct this election in a divisive fashion. In theory, for our business, certainly for public service, which has a service territory that's really the most urbanized part of our state is astonishingly diverse and getting more diverse every day. And we better think about how it is that we can live together, and how is it that a young person can grow up in East Orange or grow up in Princeton and still be blessed with an opportunity to get a good education and make a meaningful contribution to our state's economy. I don't think we should talk about these things in partisan terms anymore. I think this election taught us we better be careful, and we better think hard about how we're going to solve our problems collectively and get along. And how can we respect people who live in different areas, come from different countries, speak different languages, practice different religions, but still make them all part of making New Jersey great again genuinely. And I'm not sure if our candidates are going to be up to that challenge or not, but there is no question for public service. Our workforce is increasingly diverse. The quality of the workforce matters to us fundamentally. They need to be educated. They shouldn't have to live in certain parts of the state to work at our company. And we need to reward the young people, no matter where they live, with the opportunity to be successful in the company. It's really a very big issue. And then we have these economic issues, and we have different perspectives on them. How can we conduct a partisan election, of which I'm very familiar with what it takes? It's very simply to me, good guys against the bad guys on election day. Very few people in this room vote for the bad guys on election day, but everybody's going to want to vote for the good guys. So you want to highlight the differences with other people, but we have to find a way to solve some of these problems. Our problems are not going to get solved by demonizing certain types of people in our state. And we better get serious about trying to live together and having a little bit of respect. And we are not going to solve these problems by simply winning elections. And at the same time Donald Trump did win this national election, you saw that New Jersey went the other way. Our state, we have to figure a way to turn our diversity into a meaningful asset, and hopefully this election will do that. So, Linda, I kind of dodged you a little bit, but I'm hopefully trying to make this a little bit more pointed, because this election is going to matter, and the future governor is going to have a big say in how Michelle's going to be successful going forward.
No question. Thank you. And listen, I know I'm putting you guys on the spot for even asking that. I'd like to have a little bit of fun now. And Phil, I'm going to start with you. If you were elected governor next November, what would be your top priority?
Give him a little longer. He's going.
Wow. A couple of dual priorities. I think, though, the state debt would be the top priority, and focusing on, Walter mentioned it before, the level of pension debt is staggering in the state. Right now, we're about 37% funded, funded for that debt, and New Jersey is the 50 out of 50th in terms of their pension debt. Those numbers are climbing. One interesting thing I saw or read about very recently with the new TTF legislation is a move toward allowing the pension fund to invest more than the 10% cap that it's presently limited to in terms of bonding issues. Some of the state debt now is coming out at 4, 5, 6% type interest rates, which that's frankly and somewhat sadly due to the state's credit rating. But the debt issues are coming out with some fairly attractive interest rates, and one of the thoughts is to expand the pension fund and to allow it to invest more of its monies into our own debt, and to get some greater yield for that to help reduce some of that plan. So, I think the state debt is significant. The continuing focus on education, I think, is important. But really the optimal issue a number of people have talked about today is retention and keeping people in the state. I mean, economy is really about exchange of dollars between and amongst people and businesses. And if you're on the spend side, educating all these kids and paying for all of these programs, but not receiving the back-end return, those are dollars lost. So, we really have to do a much better job of essentially selling ourselves. I mean, you think about the attractiveness of the location of the state of New Jersey, and it's, even though it's a somewhat deteriorated infrastructure, our road systems, our rail systems, our airports, we are really uniquely positioned from a geographical standpoint to, grow this state much bigger, than it has been. But I think what people want is value for their dollar. I don't think people are greatly opposed to making the spend, but if the return for the spend is not there, then that's what kind of bites you. You saw recently GE moved their moving their corporate headquarters to Boston. Boston's not a cheap place at all, but obviously the people at GE are saying, well, it's probably a worthwhile spend of our dollars because we're going to get a lot back. In terms of trying to keep the younger generation, the millennials in here, you see a lot of the real estate developers, a lot of the folks we represent in Jersey City are catering to the millennial generation, building smaller apartments, shared living spaces, really getting creative and thinking outside of the box as to how do we bring this new generation along. I'm looking around the room, everybody looks about kind of a common age. We're all sitting here thinking about how to deal with the next generations to come, and we probably should have some of those folks in the room here too. One of the interesting byplays, Rick was talking about the election, the messaging that went out. You read some of the postscript stories. The Trump administration or the Trump campaign team seemed to have a much better handle on how to message to the younger generation than the Democrat team did. And it's important, I think, for us as business leaders to really start thinking about, how are we going to transition our businesses, make ourselves attractive workplaces for those folks who are coming along.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Phil. Bill, if there were a Governor Kastner
Time to move.
This time next year, for us or for you?
Good line. Both.
Well, first of all, I'd be under enormous pressure to exercise pardon powers for half of my fraternity brothers, I think. So that would be a tough one. I think my first day in office, I'd issue executive order kicking the Jets out of Jersey. I say that as a longtime New York Jets fan.
Remember, we are talking about the economic perspective.
Okay, all right, back to the topic at hand. I mean, look, the ACA, we're concerned about what's going to happen with the ACA and the spillover effect on New Jersey's budget. And so I was on Capitol Hill this week for that very purpose. No one knows what's going to happen. Anyone who says they know what's going to happen doesn't know what the heck they're talking about. It's a big deal. A recent study said it could have a $4 billion impact on New Jersey's economy. Repeal is easy, replace is hard. Repeal and delay, what does that mean? Because we have to set rates in the spring for 2018. 2017 is locked up. We set rates in the spring for 2018. So this idea of repeal and then punt past the midterm elections, are people actually thinking through what that means? Mm-hmm. Sticking the industry with certain mandates, but not having the financial offsets is disastrous. I think everyone agrees prohibitions on pre-existing condition discrimination should be kept in place. Guarantee issuance should be kept in place. Dependency coverage to age 26 should be kept in place. But how do you do that when you blow out subsidies, when you blow out the individual mandate? And are high-risk pools enough? So our big concern is, are there enough adults at the table to make sure we don't have, a disastrous scenario in New Jersey in which the individual market collapses and the economic impact that would follow. There are about 500,000 New Jerseyans who signed up because of Medicaid expansion. Governor Christie did the right thing, even though there was political pressure to not accept Medicaid expansion. He did, and it's been a success story. And so, are there enough individuals in Washington who are willing to move past the bumper sticker arguments and think about fallout in states like ours? That's the big question. I think our congressional delegation does. The question is, are they, will they be able to be the voices of reason?
And do they have the will? We're going to move to, thank you very much, Bill, or shall I say Governor? We are going to move to a Q&A, but I would like to add something to what our terrific panelists have said. One of the things that struck me so deeply in reading the survey was, and Michelle referenced it, was around the millennials. They are leaving, and while we're focusing our remarks really on the next several years, I think we have to, and I think this was a point that Bill was making, really think about the next several decades, and we've got to keep these young people here. If you did have a chance to read the survey, certainly housing prices, high taxes, et cetera, are an enormous factor. So from our perspective, I think we've got to have one eye on the immediate future and one eye on the long-term sort of strategic future to ensure that our children and our grandchildren have the state that we all love so much. So let's move, if we may, to Q&A. We have this terrific opportunity to hear from business leaders in the state. Anyone have any questions? Nobody. Who's brave enough to ask the first question? Yeah.
Addressing this to Rick. I recently went through installing solar panels, which I consider to be an important part of what we need for alternative energy. I started the process in May. I just had them installed last week, and the inspection comes in about 10 days. All my neighbors in my cul-de-sac are looking at this, and it's turning them off. They feel it's been a very long process. There's been a lot of stops and starts, and in actuality, it took 2 days to put up 35 panels and the digital equipment. Wow. Why does it take so long, and are they doing anything to address this?
Well, first off, solar on your house is a beneficiary of substantial public support. Production tax credits, investment tax credits, accelerated depreciation. So you may have a little bit of a slower installation, but you need to, I think maybe when your neighbors see the financial benefit to you, they may be more available for some of the inconvenience, number one. Number two is residential solar that is also net metering is generally not the business we are in. We are in the grid-connected solar business. We do most of ours on sort of unused public property like landfills and brownfields that have been identified as available for this purpose. One could make the argument that's a more appropriate way to deploy solar. And that's not meant to go too far, because that's a very controversial statement when it comes to the world of where subsidies belong. So the answer is I'm not really able to give you a good answer for that. Your neighbors are going to appreciate the financial benefit ultimately much more than they're going to appreciate the difficulty of installing. When I talk to these installers, they're all talking about the technological improvements. These time delays you're talking about all reduce their margins. Those who can get in and get out very quickly are the ones who make the most money. The technology is getting better. There's limits on the ability to convert the sun's energy into electricity at an affordable price. So that's going to be a price issue. But the simple version is maybe pick the wrong installer, maybe. Because I really mean that really, as I listen to them talk, they all talk about the ability to standardize this process and to get in and get out very quickly is one of the keys to competing with others. So it's not the best answer for you, but it's a very important public policy. Does solar belong on your rooftop and financial benefits flow to you, or is solar better served by being more public? Or should we do both? And that's a very, very hot topic that's boiling beneath the surface. And it's hundreds of millions of dollars that are on the table. So it's not an exact answer to you, but I thought I'd make you think about that bigger picture as well.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Anyone else? Well, then I'm going to ask our panel to end on a positive note. And this is sort of the speed dating portion of our panel. I'd like to just go right down the row from Walter to Rick, and I'd like you to talk about what you're excited about regarding the state economy, the future. And because I say speed dating, we're talking about maybe 5 sentences or less. So, Walter?
Sure, Linda. Well, as I said before, I was born and raised here. My family was from Newark, manufacturers, and I think the state has so much untapped potential. It's a corridor state. I live at the shore, close to the shore. I think we have so much to gain, and I think we have to deal with the affordability I'm very motivated to help with that. I think you're right. We have to really figure out how to keep our next gens here. I don't just call them millennials, because it's more than that now. It's Gen Z. That's the next one behind millennials. We have to find a way to keep them here, because they're our future. And I think, you know, somebody once said, you know, it's time to dig in. Well, I'm digging in, I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. So I think we have a lot to be thankful for here, and I'm just glad to be part of this.
Great. Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Bill.
So I get to talk to my counterparts. We're the 5th largest blues plant in the country, so I get to talk to my counterparts across. And I don't think this will be a sentiment shared by some others in this room, but I do think when I look at New Jersey comparatively, there is an appetite to take on tough issues comparatively in New Jersey. And I think we've seen some of that with the BIA's work on TTF, and I think the governor's absence from New Jersey while running for president probably had an impact in terms of, you know, having a more aggressive agenda for the state in the last couple of years. But the governor's back and has 13 months, and so can we take on some of these tough issues in the short term? We certainly have some big ticket items that could help, you know, reduce healthcare costs. That's big, you know. So can we get the governor back, get engaged, and address these issues? That's kind of how we're looking at it.
So that appetite to take on the challenge.
Yeah, and in Jersey, look, I mean, it's a Jersey thing, right? So if it's a fight, I think the legislatures, I think the legislative leadership by and large has been, I think, willing to take on some of the tough issues, and I think we got to hold their feet to the fire to continue that.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Phil?
I'm excited about the resurgence of urban areas. I'm a born and raised Jersey City kid. I lost the argument when I got married. That's why I live in Nutley now. But you know, what I've seen change in Jersey City over my years, I went back in 2001 and opened our office there just as the real estate tide was, you know, shifting and coming into, you know, full bore. We had a little bit of a waylay in 08, 09, 10, but you know, it's back going full steam. But, you know, I'm seeing the same things now happening in Newark. Camden, to a degree, is starting. Camden's probably about 10 years behind, you know, where Jersey City was. But you think about they're set up directly across from a major urban center, Philadelphia. They've got a body of water in front of them. They've got a waterfront to build on and develop. There are some big projects that are going into the ground in Newark right now. There's some more to come. You know, a few things that, you know, we're getting involved with. The urban foothold and the urban footprint is really a significant attraction to the millennials. They seem, at least for the time being, to want to live, stay, work, eat, and play there. We'll see after they have kids and families whether or not that holds true. But the resurgence of the urban areas, I think, is significant for this state because it will really help to grow the economy and to keep it as a place where younger people want to stay after they get out of school.
You know, I have to say, I think that's a terrific point. We really haven't for decades had a viable urban center in this state, and suddenly it seems that we might. I'm also a Jersey City girl, so I appreciate...
I knew I liked you.
I appreciate that comment, but for those of you who have been in Newark lately, has everyone seen One Theater Square and the groundbreaking? Well, the mayor recently was at a meeting that I had attended, and there are 8 different development projects right now underway in Newark. Have you been to Military Park in the summer? It's incredible, a place where you probably wouldn't be seen a few years ago. It really now is a place of beauty and nature and sort of enjoyment. So I think it's a great point. Rick, how about yourself?
Wow. So certainly there is this big issue of climate change or the weather changing and the appropriate responses to it. Certainly, as I think Phil mentioned, our geography, which is making globalization being felt in our state. There's enormous demographic change. There's this challenge of innovation in my world. I could almost just hold up the phone, and the younger you are, the more this means to you. And the ability to restore power, to know when the grid is working, to change the temperature on your house, using this is an amazing infrastructure challenge for public service. And we're looking forward to that. Hopefully finding a future role for nuclear power, and certainly doing the things to make a business climate conducive to investing in the state and responding to the needs of the other businesses, because ultimately we're a service provider. Because if they succeed, we have lots to do. And our state hasn't been growing load, as we say in our business lately. So hopefully we can do the things to help everybody in this room do more business. And those are enormous challenges. And then the very simple challenge of, can we all take different perspectives and try to come up with some common productive solutions? Or should we start calling each other names again?
So again, that sort of collaborative approach you had referenced earlier, Rick. Well, thank you all. I know this was an economic panel, and yet we had a wide range of topics touching upon debt, global warming, urban planning, politics, on and on and on. But every single one of those items really does impact our economic health. And so I appreciate sort of the diverse opinions here. I appreciate the deep perspective that you each provide. And I'd like to ask all of you to join me in thanking our terrific panel.